Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of my podcast, Cult Conversations, the Influence Continuum with Dr. Steve Hassan. And I'm been looking forward to talking with Rose Sword for a long time, actually. And unfortunately, her husband, Richard, passed away, so we can't talk with him too. But Rose and Rick worked with my mentor, Philip Zimbardo, extensively on the time perspective therapy model. And I want to talk with Rose Sword about these valuable paradigms that can be very empowering for people who've had post-traumatic stress disorder and so many other issues. So, Rose, I'm going to just read a little bit of your bio, if you don't mind, that you are co-developer of Time Perspective Therapy, which is a talk therapy based on Philip Zimbardo's time perspective theory. And in 2012, Rose and her husband, psychologist Rick Sword, and Phil co-authored The Time Cure, Overcoming PTSD with the New Psychology of Time Perspective Therapy. Good, Rose, you're holding up the book cover. Great. Thank you so much. And then, unfortunately, Rick passed away from cancer a year and a half later. Rose and Phil continued collaborating on time perspective theory projects. And they developed a mental health app for Happify.com, wrote a popular Psychology Today blog column, contributed chapters to several books, including Bandy Lee, who my listeners know me well, the New York Times bestseller, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. And Rose and Phil also published 2 additional time perspective therapy books, Living and Loving Better and Seeing Through Grief. We can see Seeing Through Grief over your shoulder, Rose, in the video. The latter was released 6 months before Phil passed away in October of 2024 at the age of 91. And let's start with Philip Zimbardo, because as you know, a little bit of my story, I got out of the Moonies and I was desperate to study social psychology and understand how my mind got hacked. And when I wrote this letter to the Stanford professor Zimbardo of the famous Zimbardo prison study, I didn't expect to get a handwritten response, but I did. And throughout, I think it was around the Jonestown massacre period that he wrote back to me. And we got to, he mentored me and befriended me and taught me. And I've interviewed him on video a few times, and he wound up doing a course at Stanford called The Psychology of Mind Control, and used 2 chapters of my first book, Combating Cult Mind Control. Later, he did Discovering Psychology and added a thing on cults, and he featured me. And then he did Heroic Imagination Project, and he also added a thing on cults. So, he was a legend. He was a visionary. He was a genius. And I feel so a hole in my heart that he is no longer with us. And, but I also know he was declining in quality of life towards the end. I got to see him a few months before.
Yes.
So let's start, Rosemary. How did you and your husband meet Dr. Zimbardo?
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I feel your grief and loss. I feel it too, very much. But Rick had met him decades earlier when he was young and always raved about him. And then we discovered that Phil was coming to Hawaii to introduce a new book that he had written with John Boyd, called not the Lucifer Effect. It was the Time Paradox. And it was his findings in working developing something called the Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory, which helped. They created it as a tool. They were hoping that it would help diagnose people with different mental injuries, perhaps, or disorders. Anyway, so he was at the Phil was at the Hawaii Psychological Association conference, and we were very excited and sat in the audience. And Phil gave his presentation. Explained the ZTPI, the Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory, and then one of the audience members, and there were many of us, very eager people to hear from this legend. The person stood up and said, well, have you created a therapy that we can use this ZTPI with, and Zim said, that's not up to me. Basically, that is, I am just the harbinger or the bringer of what my discoveries are. It's up to you, the clinicians, to create something with it. So Rick and I were sitting in the audience, and actually, as he was describing things in the ZTPI in the book, we were already calculating how we could turn it into a therapy.
Yeah, it's great.
We introduced ourselves afterwards and went to Zim and said, we're going to do this. And he said, stay in touch.
Yep.
And we did.
Yep. And he was a preeminent social psychologist, not a clinician. Yes. So it would make sense.
A researcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's, I don't know how to do that. You do that.
Yeah.
So and we went back and had a clinic on Maui, Hawaii. And specialty was post-trauma with veterans. And there were so many veterans in Hawaii, all different ages, and had served in all different wars in the military and different branches. So we read his book over the weekend, and the following week we started putting together something that we could use. And probably we were, within a month, we had developed the foundation of what would become time perspective therapy. And started using it. And within a couple of months, our veterans were improving. And so they were so happy with the improvement in their PTSD that they started writing letters to Zimbardo and saying, there's this therapy that's been developed about blah, blah, And so he called us and said, okay, so you did something. What is it? We started talking. And probably 6 months later, there were 2 of his students living with us as they conducted a study on the effects of what we now call time perspective therapy.
Yep. Great.
Then there was a 4-year study that Zim oversaw. And at the end of that 4-year study, we published the book, The Time Cure. So just if I may, for my listeners, I'll state that part of the problem of post-traumatic stress disorder, and many former cult members suffer from this, is when they remember their time in the cult being traumatized, they're reliving the trauma when in fact they're living in a safe environment now, but they have this time shift that's out of their control. And just being able to explain to my clients and your clients that, hey, we have the capacity to stay in the present and regulate our feelings and our thoughts and our emotional states. But I don't want to take away your thunder. I really would like you to explain what are the major components of time perspective therapy. Okay. There are different time frames that we all know, the past, the present, and the future. And in time perspective, theory and therapy, we break these down into different parts. There is, in the past, there is past negative, which are the negative thoughts that hold us back.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's past positive, because even though we might feel that nothing good happened in our past, surely we can find something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what we have to do is dig beyond or deeper than beyond before the trauma happened or something, you know. Anyway, so that's past positive and past negative.
Mm-hmm.
In the present, we have what is called present fatalism, which would be like depression and my life sucks and it's always going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
And or present hedonism, which is living in the present moment, but in many ways trying to maybe find things that we might enjoy to do. And I guess the best example might be children they are basically present hedonists. They haven't built up a past, enough of a past to understand how time works. They can't project themselves into the future. So they're living in the moment now and wanting to do fun things. Anyway, so there's present hedonism and present fatalism. And in the future, Phil just had future. We broke it down in time perspective therapy into future positive and future negative, because you can definitely, especially nowadays, you know, people can have and for good reason, a negative feelings about the future. Nothing will get better. It's just, you know, we can get into that later, I suppose, or not. But and then there's future positive, where things are going to work out, and so we work toward a better life for ourselves and the world.
Sure.
So those are the things. There's something else that Phil and John Boyd, his student, who is now high up in the tech world, when they developed the ZTPI, it's called transcendental. The ZTPI, transcendental. It has to do with people's feelings about an afterlife, if it exists. We don't use that in time perspective therapy, because many of our clients didn't have a view.
Right, they were humanist or atheists. They didn't believe in an afterlife.
Yes, agnostic or whatever. Yeah, they didn't. So we just we don't even use that in determining anything. So this is the basis of time perspective theory. Then what we did was we took, Rick and I, we took that and realized what you said. When a person has PTSD, they're stuck in the past and they're facing backwards. They're facing that way, where they're not in the present.
Right.
So what we try to do is turn them around to face the future.
Right.
So that you're living in the present, but you are going to be focusing on the future.
Right.
And how we do that is, again, mining our past to look for those positive things to overlay. It sounds so easy, but it can be done. And overlay when the negative past memories, the trauma, happens.
Right.
And as you know, PTSD is comprised of a trauma, and leaves you depressed and with anxiety, right? And it's feeling stressed. And time perspective therapy works on all of those things.
Right.
So if a person is suffering from depression, it will help them.
Right. And for people born in cults, for example, it's not a single traumatic event. It's a lifetime of traumatic events or complex PTSD.
Yes.
But I think we both agree that the key is having people being in the present in their body with a positive future orientation.
Exactly.
Where they're feeling in control of their thoughts and feelings and choices and not getting triggered, unconsciously by stimuli or people that are stimuli back into reliving a trauma that actually is finished, except that
yes.
it was brought into our bodies on a cellular
Right,
level.
exactly. That's the other thing, because a cellular level,
Right.
absolutely, because all of these things, all of these experiences, the negative and the positive,
Right.
but especially the traumatic, are stored in different parts of the brain. And so
Right.
when that happens, yeah, you can see something or hear something and you have no control, or you think you have no control over being flipped back into that situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
Makes a lot of sense. So, could you share a case study, perhaps from the book or from your therapeutic work or your husband's past?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll share one of the veterans that
Please.
were part of the study. This young man, he joined the military after high school for the GI Bill,
Mm-hmm.
and he was sent to Abu Ghraib.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And was transporting this. I'm going to give you the trauma first. Okay. And so he was transporting 2 prisoners from point A to point B, I guess.
Yeah, this is the Iraqi Abu Ghraib, horror show that Phil wound up doing expert witness work for one of the military people who was on trial for abusing Iraqi prisoners. Please continue.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for...
Sure.
Yeah. So, and anyway, he got one prisoner into the helicopter and the other one ran away. So he was chasing the other one and butted him, and he had some technical gear on and stuff. The guy fell down, so he went to get help get the guy up, and the guy was anyway, he passed away. In an autopsy, they discovered that he had a terminal illness anyway, and this man was very, very ill when he had a lot of parasites in his body. He was very ill. But of course, that young man took it upon himself. That was his first trauma. His second trauma.
So in other words, he felt like he had killed the man when the man died organically while in his care.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Just clarifying.
Then he, the second trauma compound was a helicopter crash, and he discovered that, I'm confusing him with another vet who was part of what happened to one of our senators. There was an IUD, and a bomb went off in this caravan of trucks. And when he got there to help, he discovered that 2 of the half a dozen people that were killed, one of them was his uncle, and the other his cousin.
Whoa.
Yes. So he came home and was very, very broken. And as is typical, I think, of a lot of people who suffer from trauma, he didn't make the phone call to us. His parents did. And when that happens, if the person themselves doesn't call, then a lot of times they're not ready. They don't want to come. Mm-hmm. So, and that was the case of this. And they made an appointment. He didn't show. Did it again. Didn't show. Then it was, okay, he has to call us. He has to be ready. And he finally did. Mm-hmm. And when he came in, he was the age of my oldest son. And so he was able to open up, and actually they had gone to the same high school, so known each other. So in time he opened up, and we were able to mine his past and find some good memories, because he had lots of them. And to overlay and replace the negative trauma whenever he had them. We introduced him to other veterans of all ages, and so that he could become more social and share experiences, so that he was having better times now in the present. And instead of being present fatalistic, which he was becoming a little more present hedonistic. And over the course of weeks and months, we started looking at his future, which he was mostly staying home and doing odd jobs around for people and stuff. He went back to school and became was working in pharmaceuticals. And last we spoke, which was a few years ago, though, he was working on getting his degree to become a therapist to help others. So, wonderful young man.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I think we share a passion for loving to help people and be empowered to live their lives more fully.
Isn't that what it's all about? I mean, if you're in this field, you want to help people.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, I want to get people in touch with the love and back in that instead of the fear.
Right.
And today one of my goals was to bring the love, Steve. Gotta bring the love to everybody. It's
right.
It's out there. There are good people. There are good people in the world.
Right. So I'm sure you're using lots of other therapeutic techniques in addition to the time perspective therapy. I'm sure you're doing the rapport and trust building and the therapeutic alliance, etc. But I think it's just such a fascinating frame therapeutically to call people's attention to, that we need to be in the present at all times with a positive future orientation. And so, for me, I use the frame from being in a cult of, you don't want to be controlled by anyone or anything. You want to be in control of your own mind and body. It's your life. So you need to be the master. You need to be the author of it. And so I frame it to my clients as, you need a toolkit of lots of techniques and strategies, because different circumstances may require different strategies, but you can still always come back to best practices. And I can't help but reference Viktor Frankl, who survived 4 concentration camps, including Auschwitz, with the most egregious treatment possible for a human being to suffer through and survive. And he wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that there were many younger, more fit people who just gave up hope and died. But he had work to do. He wanted to see his wife. He wanted to do his work. He wanted to write books. He wanted to teach. And it kept him going despite the present time abuse, when he was in the concentration camp, starving and freezing and with all of this maltreatment. But he basically, I think, it elucidated a key, which is, the Nazis can't control my mind and my reactions. I have a choice over how I want to conduct myself. And in these challenging times, we're recording this at the end of February of 2025, with Trump in power, asserting a dictatorship in service of Putin and other dictators. We have it good. You're in Maui, one of my favorite places on the earth. I'm in Massachusetts, one of the bluest of the states.
Yes.
Very, very human rights centered place. And we don't know what the future is. We think it's going to be bad, but we don't know. But we need to have hope. We need to to not allow the negative news cycles and everything to have us give up hope. And we need to come back to these same principles that Zimbardo and you and Rick are teaching about, that we need to have pleasure in the now, that we don't, life isn't drudgery and only sacrifice. We need to have fun. We need to listen to music and dance and play with puppies and cats and walk in nature and go swimming in the ocean and just have awe and wonder and joy. Forgive me for my rant.
I love it. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. And you're exactly right. And thank you for bringing up Victor. I mean, we can't give up. We can't. And there is much to do. We have a lot of work to do. And there's beauty everywhere. I don't care where you are. You can find beauty. It might be in the color of something, or the wood grain that you're looking at. If there is there's beauty everywhere. It doesn't have to be Maui. It can be, you can be anywhere. There's beauty everywhere.
Yeah, and there's beautiful things in people. Too many people are spending too much time on screens and on their phone instead of like hanging out and turning off the phone and looking into people's eyes and smiling and telling jokes.
It's become an addiction, and I'm sure you know people that are addicted. I certainly do, and we have to, I actually kind of raise my hand to that a lot of times.
Right.
It seems easier to lose yourself in a screen or screen time and tune out everything, all this bad stuff that we think is happening, but there's good stuff happening too.
Right.
And and people are rising up, and we can be a part of that. We can be part of it. There's work to do.
Yep. So you mentioned just before, when I was asking you to share a case study, you were talking about parents calling your clinic first and their son wasn't ready. Talk a little bit more about family, friends, caregivers, and what role they might serve in conjunction with time perspective therapy.
Oh, well, very, very important. And not in every case necessarily. I mean, because time perspective therapy can be used for people suffering from trauma, but it can also be used in couples therapy, or individual therapy and group therapy. So, but there are many, many cases where we would ask, like in I'm going to call him Chemo, not his name, but in his case, we did also meet with his mom and dad, and also his sister, and separately, to hear how they were doing, too. There are explaining time perspective therapy to them in like the most, in the simplest terms. Everybody could grasp it. Like I said, you're facing backwards, you want to be in the present, you want to face the future and create a positive future. Everybody gets that. And they could start practicing it too, or helping him, Chemo, when he needed assistance, because it is a team effort. It takes a family, it takes a community, it takes a village to help others. And this is where the social aspect comes into play. So
I just to add my modality in terms of my clients, I often want to meet with family members and friends privately, confidentially, hear their take on what they think is going on with the person, because the person may not disclose or even be aware of things that that the family knows about and such. And I look at it as a complex system, because especially if they're living at home, the more I can influence family and friends and coach them on how to interact and role model the healthy behaviors,
1,000%.
it just amplifies. Now, I often will give homework assignments. Do you do that in time perspective?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you give an example of a?
Sure. If that would depend on what time frame we're working on.
Okay.
We'll start in the past. So in the past, if we're working in the very beginning of time perspective therapy, we do try to show people, if they don't have like a breathing technique or some sort of simple meditation technique to quiet their mind, we would do a breathing exercise for them and get them used to that and ask them, and that would be their homework. Whenever they're feeling anxious or whatever, remember to breathe. Stop that. I won't even
breathing
go into
is it, right? And it's the way that we can most affect our conscious and unconscious. We can
slow our heart rate.
Yes.
Slow the breath, then you slow the heart rate. Slow the heart rate, then everything, kind of all the anger and everything can come down.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that would be, that's homework.
Yeah. It
seems very simple, but it's homework.
Breathe into the count of 4 and breathe out to the count of 8, or make a sound when you're making the exhale. Let all the anxiety out, right?
Exactly. Whatever works for the therapist, whatever works for the person. Exactly. You do that. And then also start mining. I keep saying that, but there's a treasure trove of good memories in the past that everybody has.
Yeah.
So we would find those. We'd find those golden moments in a person's life that they can think of and remember in as much detail as possible, so that you are using as much of your brain. Who was there? What did you smell? What were the colors? What was going on? Touch as many parts of the brain as you can to embed that in them. And so if we get like maybe 3 of those going in a session and over again, so that they can start overlaying as soon as they start feeling that or hearing metal on metal because they've been in a car accident and they're having a flashback, whatever. They can start overlaying the good thought over that. So that's another form of homework. Yeah. If we're in the present, then homework might be call somebody that you haven't spoken to in a while, or text them, or email them, or communicate with them. Maybe get more social in the now.
Beautiful.
That's for instance. Go to a museum if you have them. Get out in nature. Take a walk. Forest bathing is sort of a thing. So if you can,
forest bathing is worth stopping for a second and just saying. I think it was a big thing from Japan.
It is.
And trees talk to you. You have a feeling when you're in a forest.
They are healing. They are beings.
They are beings.
They are living beings, and they are here. And we should treat them with respect.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. So anyway, forest bathing. I dig it. And I did this eco-psychology video for people in Poland, and they said, please do us one on eco-psychology. So I did, and I guess it plays over there, but a big part of that was forest bathing and going out in the it's wonderful. Anyway, so yes, and then in the future, here's a little bit more homework. At the future, for the future, we might ask them to make a list of what you would like to do in this coming week. That could just be doing the laundry, whatever, but then check it off. We try to get them planning for the future. Yeah. And then in time that takes off. Yeah. Okay, back to you, Steve.
Yeah, no, empowering people to feel like if they can master time, they can master life. If I can quote your work and Dr. Z's work, which he's at the end he said, please call me Dr. Z. I like it.
Oh, okay.
He had a T-shirt, Superman T-shirt with the Z.
Super Z.
That was so funny and everything. So I just want to comment again for my listeners. I've been talking about the brain that changes itself and just neuroplasticity and neurogenesis and how we really can rewire our
We
associations, our
can.
neuronal synaptic. And that's what you were describing, to go back in the past where it's dominated by these negative experiences of the trauma.
Yes.
But you want to deliberately encourage people to find positive memories, amplify those. So it isn't just the negative thing in the past. You have positive things to build your sense of self to go forward with.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want a base in positivity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, because it's new, and I read your bio, that you developed apps for Happify.com.
Happify,
Tell
yes.
us what you did with
they
that.
Contacted us. Yeah, thank you. They contacted Phil and me a few years ago. And then Phil, we contacted him.
Right.
What am I saying? And then he contacted me and said, can we do this? And I'm like, sure, we can do this, Yeah. And so we spoke to the head of Happify, or one of them, and they told us that what they do are 4-week tracks. So that in week 1, whatever, you focus on this, week 2, something else, blah, blah, blah. And we thought, well, that's perfect, because week 1 will be like an overview of time perspective therapy and a little bit of the past. Week 2 would be the past. Week 3 would be the present. Week 4 would be the future. And we did it. And they're free apps. So we did that for PTSD. And on the tracks, you do have some homework, but they work. They're wonderful. It's very non-invasive. It's very private, It is Happify, everything they do. And then we did another one. That was on PTSD. We did another one more recently on grief, because we were working on the grief book. So there's a 4-week track on grief. Yes. And we're pretty proud of those. We'd like people to go and get help.
So can we talk about your book, Seeing Through the Grief?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Phil and I started it, thank you, years ago. After Rick passed away. And also Rick and I had done a lot of work in grief counseling with people. And, you're leading people through and adapting time perspective therapy to assist people in moving forward in their lives. When they're suffering from grief and loss. And people can grieve from so many things. It's not just the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a job, a career. I think a whole lot of people right now are in grief, or they will be soon, or they're going through the stages of grief with what's happening.
Right.
We can lose
So how are we defining grief? Let's unpack that emotional state.
Well, Guy, Steve.
Well, I can add my thing, but I can't help but look at the title of the book over your shoulder, Seeing Through the Grief. And of course, time perspective therapy is about creating perspective, which is a visual focus as opposed to a kinesthetic or a feeling state focus. And so there's mourning, there's this sudden accident death, or there's a long-term illness, or seeing a loved one get dementia.
I see what you mean. There are many types of grief, though. Yeah, I see what you're saying. There are all sorts of anticipatory grief, which is someone's going to pass away, which is what I went through when Rick was ill and I was his caregiver. People
well, let me interrupt you if I may, and it's personal and you can decline, but you mentioned anticipatory grief. What is that? What were you going through? And how did you deal with it? How did you cope?
Well, anticipatory grief is when, we were told that my husband was terminally ill. And so that this person is going to pass away. and you are maybe not feeling full grief yet, which are the full flood of emotions,
right.
but you are anticipating that you are going to be feeling this.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it. I mean, for myself, in during those times when I was caregiving for him and he was in so much pain, it was just so horrible.
So sorry.
Anyway, I kept thinking my life won't always be this way. It's not always going to be this way. And when you were talking about Viktor Frankl, I was thinking it's probably something that he told himself too. Life will not always be this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always going to be this way. Well, maybe I will die, but maybe I won't. Maybe I will survive, and maybe I will go on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that my life would be very different. So I was anticipating that in the not too distant future, I was going to go through the ringer worse than I was now. And that what I was feeling in the moment, which was get through the day, help this person as much as I can, help the kids, keep the business running, the clinic running, just all these different things. I kept busy. That's another form of grief, is like keeping yourself busy so that you don't feel. It's like you go from task to task,
right.
because it's too much to.
Right. I
feel.
think sometimes we use anticipation or, future negativizing as a coping tool, but then like autoimmune diseases, it can have a deleterious effect and actually paralyze you or make you, demotivate you
Absolutely.
to doing what
definitely.
you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
so to find the balance of, I don't want to shut down all my feelings and do a black and white all or nothing pattern, but I also don't want to be shocked when my loved one is no longer here. And life's a journey, and we know that we're going to die. We know everyone is going to die. Nobody's eternal.
Right.
Sometimes, people say goodbye for the day to go to work, and then you never see them again.
Exactly.
And for that type of trauma, it's a shock to the system. And often you're in denial for a while. That couldn't have happened. It was someone else that got hit by the car or whatever. But we need to come back to being grounded, ultimately, I think, in our body and in the present time. But again, not be overwhelmed by our negative emotions to the point where we're projecting them into the future. And that's the definition of depression, really, is that we can't imagine laughing and having a positive time or meeting another person. Or
it just reminds me that a lot of people, I think, feel that they don't deserve to be happy. They don't deserve to feel that. That happens, I think, a lot. Like with that young man I was talking about earlier.
Like guilt over survival, that type of thing. Yep.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Why that person and why not me, or why not somebody else?
Right.
Well, I don't do that personally. It's like, why not me? That's more my thing. Instead of why me. It's like, why not me? Experience. Life is rich and full of experiences, and if we don't have the negative and the pain and the sorrow, then I shouldn't say that, but what I should say is that I think it amplifies when the good does happen. Then we can experience that maybe equally as powerfully.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
So,
well, and on some level, our philosophies, our personal philosophies, are our filtering device for how to interpret all the stimuli that's coming at us. Like, looks like Buddha over your shoulder also.
That is Kuan Yin. Yes, but she is the goddess of compassion. I do have many Buddhas around here because I don't consider myself a Buddhist. However, I love the idea of compassion.
So it's
mercy,
a Chinese
and love. She is, yeah. I'm part Chinese.
Okay.
and Hawaiian. Just so
Right.
I have those philosophies as well as like my Irish dad's
Interesting.
Roman Catholic upbringing, whatever, which is how I was
Interesting.
raised.
So, therapist to therapist, I want to just comment on how I'm more and more aware that there's a trap in being too empathetic.
Oh,
that
yes.
you want to have compassion more than over empathy. And I did a live stream yesterday, and I played Jane Fonda's clip at the SAG Awards, and she's talking a lot about empathy, and I'm thinking, I wish you had said compassion.
Compassion
but
instead, yes.
Please.
Well, that's interesting too, because it's funny. When I did my hair today, I thought, I'm going to bring Jane. Want to bring Jane energy.
Yeah.
Just
Jane
I mean,
Fonda.
the positivity, the positivity part. I have been accused, and I know I am too empathetic. I know it. I have sat with clients and cried and held their hands. And you know what? I was in Lisbon giving a talk, and I said that to a group of mental health, and this woman from Russia, a therapist from Russia, stood up and said, "You said that you sit and you cry with your, she calls them patients, I call them clients." And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "That is wrong. You should never do that. You should build a wall. You should be in a bubble. You should not be touched by your patients," and everything like that. And I was just like, "Oh no, lady. That is not my style."
I was taught that when I first became a therapist. I was taught that, and then I was like, "No, that doesn't work for me."
No, and I'm sure I know people that it does work for, and that's good. I wish I could do that. I can't. My husband couldn't do it either. We would cry. I would sit next to. We had a therapy dog, so he would come in, big lab. He'd put his head on their leg, and make them feel better. I remember this one vet was touching Scout, our dog, and crying when he was explaining what was going on with him, talking to the dog, which was so perfect. And he said, "I feel so bad for this dog." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because I'm giving him all of my pain and everything. I feel good now. And now he's got it." I said, "He doesn't have it. Look, he's wagging his tail. He's good.
Great.
That's his job."
Yeah.
It's his job. He's happy. Anyway,
that is beautiful. I haven't used a therapy dog in sessions, but that's perfect. The dog is happy to help you unburden.
Yeah, that's my job.
That's his job. Yeah, I love it.
He wants to do his job. So, okay, empathy, yeah. Okay, compassion, definitely. Too empathetic, yeah, we both are, you and I. So, is that a bad thing?
It's a bad thing if you burn out, which I had to learn the hard way, many burnouts, and I had to kind of develop a strategy where I kept a part of myself from empathizing. Like, there's a part of me that's there to cry and be with the person, but there's a part of me that isn't the therapist role. And that was a way that, and also my clients just felt closer to me when they saw me reacting to their strong emotions.
I couldn't help it. But then people will talk to you. It's like, you feel for me. I do. And I think that's what made me a good therapist.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caring.
Right. Really, yeah. So too empathetic, yeah, sometimes. But what I was going to say was too, I would take, if I couldn't get somebody out of my mind, I would just, before I went to sleep that night, I would just say, in my, well, maybe I can dream about and have some thoughts or whatever with this person in my heart, and take them in with me and frequently the next day I would have some sort of a revelation about this person and share it with them or or devise something to help them the next time I saw them. So I don't know. I mean, I just want to tell people that are listening, that are watching this, that we don't stop thinking about you.
Right.
We don't, when you leave or we are off the phone or whatever, you are with us.
Right.
We carry you with us. We are working for,
we care about you.
We care about you. I'm going to say it. I love you. And I'm going to do my absolute best for you.
Right.
And if it's not working, then it's not working. And here's the name of somebody else. But I hope, anyway.
So we're getting towards the end. I'd like you to
fast.
talk about Living and Loving Better too.
Okay. Living and Loving Better was written, Phil and I wrote that. We actually started working on it when Rick was ill. And sort of wrote the first chapter, but then had to rewrite everything. It did take us a while because we were doing other things in the meantime, Phil and I. But for instance, going to Poland and teaching people there about time perspective therapy, and other things. But we had a fairly popular Psychology Today column, and at that time, people could comment. They had to take that away in the Trump era because we were. I don't. You have a column?
I do.
Right?
I blog at Psychology Today.
Right. Okay. A blog. So I was getting death threats all the time. I don't know if you were, but I did all.
Well,
and I wasn't the only person.
Yeah, I mean, the chapter for Bandy Lee's book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, I mean, there was Robert Lifton, another one of my mentors, Phil and yourself. I mean, a lot of luminaries went out of, really stuck their neck out and said, we feel a duty to warn. We're not diagnosing, but we have a duty to warn. We're smart, compassionate, educated people, and we see danger.
Right, exactly. I want to finish. I want to get back to this, but I want to really quickly finish up Living and Loving Better.
Yes.
So, in the before times, we were able to have comments, and in the comment section, people would be asking me questions, and so I think, a lot of people didn't answer, but I'm not like that. So I would be answering people, and then other people would chime in. Wonderful information. So what we did was we took a whole bunch of columns and put them together and wrote Living and Loving Better into, this is about, people were interested in sex. So that was a chapter on that. Here's about parenting. There's a chapter on that. All these different things, because we had so many columns and so many incredible comments. So that's where Living and Loving. Getting back to, that was the before times. Then Phil and I said, okay, this guy Trump, he's not going to be president. No way. But let's make sure. So we wrote a column we started writing about the narcissistic personality and bullies and stuff like that, leading up to the elephant in the room and talking about his mental health. And that's when John Gartner first contacted us and said, we're putting together a book.
Yes.
And then Bandy got involved, and then that became The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. But it's because that column went viral with well over 1 million reads. And so it's like, okay, people are really interested, and Phil really stepped out on a giant limb here. Writing that, and so
and I did a rant or a video on my website when he was attacked about the Zimbardo prison study, and I stated what I have learned, and I wrote The Cult of Trump, that we're in a time of psychological warfare. And I learned about a Stanford political sociologist who did his dissertation on something called fourth generation psychological warfare. And it's aimed at undoing experts, science, and democratic institutions. And I said, in my opinion, this attack on Dr. Z is because he's such an expert and because he was speaking out about Trump and that he was targeted, as I am targeted and other people are targeted. But he was world renowned scholar.
Oh,
so they made extra efforts to try to besmirch his reputation. But the Zimbardo prison study showed my BITE model of mind control behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, put people in a closed environment, give them roles, and it's the impermissible social psychology experiment, right? And because of that and Milgram's experiment and one other, IRBs were formed for human experimentation. But Dr. Z was like, really, he was such a visionary. He was amazing.
He was, and he did so much good after that.
Yeah.
I mean, so much good. And he should be praised.
Yeah.
And he was a rock star outside of this country.
Yes.
If you traveled with him overseas, he was, everybody knew him.
Yeah. He got a lot more attention outside of the U.S. again, because I feel this Christian nationalist, agenda with fourth generation, because they want creationism. They don't want evolution taught. They don't want women to have equal rights with men. They don't want gay rights. They're homophobic. So it's this culture war thing that and when you're in the spotlight, you get extra heat. So I'm not surprised to hear about the attacks on your column, but truth still stands. And
exactly.
He was a good guy.
Right. He was a good guy. He was a really good guy. He was a good man, and he made people feel special. He had this wonderful ability to really listen. He would have been a great therapist. I mean, because he would listen to you. He would focus in on what you're saying, and
he knew about doing therapy. I can tell you that. And he of all of the luminaries that I had the benefit in my career to know, he would respond to a text or an email like every single time, and not 2 weeks later. And he really made me feel special.
Yeah.
But
that was a gift.
But not not for no reason, but just like he really loves teaching. He loved his students.
Yes. Oh, that was another thing. Traveling with them and such. And I'm talking them, meaning Christina as well, his wife, Christina.
I love
Maslach.
Christina Maslach.
They would talk to every student that was in the queue before leaving. It must have been exhausting after their presentation. Yep. It was absolutely amazing. They're an amazing dynamic duo, just an incredible couple.
She was the hero of
both
Zimbardo prison study. But people don't know that she was a renowned social psychologist in her own right, and she wrote an award-winning book on burnout. And I tried to get her to be interviewed for this podcast, but she was too busy. But who knows? Maybe at some point,
maybe down
the
the road. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Give her a little time. Yeah, it's only been 4 months since Zim passed.
Yeah, it's and they talked about Stanford doing some type of memorial, and I said I would fly out for it. Just give me advanced warning, because he was just I just felt blessed to know him, and
absolutely,
and I'm so grateful that he just always encouraged me, do this, do this, do this, sure. When he was APA president, it's like, put together a panel on cults of hatred,
wow.
And pleasure, happily. Yes, sir. Report.
That's part of the, if you worked with him, that means you did the work.
Yeah. No, but he taught me, and I'm, now I have a PhD and I have students, and I get to pass on what I've learned from Dr. Z.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was a gift and a blessing, and he is sorely missed.
Yes, and he will live on through his students and through his incredible contributions. So
yes, absolutely.
Rose Sword, co-developer of time perspective therapy. Last words are yours as we're wrapping up.
Oh my gosh. Well, let us all remember to be kind and compassionate, and that old saying, take just a couple seconds maybe to walk in someone else's shoes if we're feeling a little disgruntled about someone or some people or whatever. Mm-hmm. It helps me sometimes to think about someone as think of them, envision them if I'm feeling very negative towards somebody, and I do a lot lately, as a small child, and how they are a small child needing attention and love. It does not excuse their behavior as an adult, but it gets me out of feeling, I'm going to use the 4-letter word, hate.
Yeah. Well, hate. I frequently visualize Donald Trump in diapers as a 2-foot
That's what I'm
child.
saying.
I knew you were, and I wanted to name it as we wrap up because it helped. Because people put him up on a pedestal, and I see him as a child who's just, he had a horrible childhood. He was, suffered from an attachment disorder.
Exactly.
He was indoctrinated to be a predator or prey. So always, eat or be eaten. And he was raised in the Norman Vincent Peale power of positive thinking. So doubting is a sin. And he was just, bred to be a cult leader, in my opinion, a malignant narcissist through and through.
Exactly. But also we're seeing our other president, I call him Elon Musk as well. I mean, I try to not feel hateful with him too. But I mean,
yeah, I have not gotten to the point of calling him president. But then again, I don't call Trump president either whenever I can avoid it. But thank you so much for doing this. And we're going to write a blog. We'll send it to you for your review, and you can edit it. We'll put links to all your books and the Psychology Today blog and anything else that you want people to know about, as well as Dr. Z's philipzimbardo.com, I believe is his website now.
Yep.
So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye. Steve Hassan here. It's been decades since my family rescued me from the Moonies. I've been at this for over 47 years. The need has never been greater. If you're able, please consider hitting the super thanks button below, and it'll help us to do better. Every penny will help us toward our goal of educating the planet about undue influence. Remember, it's your mind. Only you should control it.